The bourbon bottle nearly slipped from my grip. I caught it at the last second, my fingers clenching around the neck hard enough to hurt, watching the amber liquid slosh dangerously close to the rim. My lips were still moving. I'd been whispering again. Just get through tonight. Micah needs you. Just tonight. The words died in my throat when I heard the voice cut through the low jazz and murmured conversations. Who is she talking to? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Everything rippled outward from it. The couple at table 7 stopped mid-laugh. The businessman reviewing contracts in the corner booth looked up. Even the music seemed to fade, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire world. I froze, the bottle suspended over the crystal tumbler, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I didn't need to look to know who had spoken. The Obsidian Lounge had a particular silence that only one man could create. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of held breath, of bodies going still, of danger walking into a room and making itself comfortable. Morris Freeman had arrived. No one. Sir. The words scraped out of my throat, barely louder than the whisper I'd been caught making. My hands moved on autopilot, finishing the pour with a steadiness I didn't feel. McAllen 25. 2 fingers. Neat. The routine saved me from completely falling apart. Look at me. It wasn't a request. Nothing Morris Freeman said was ever a request. I'd been working at the Obsidian for 8 months, and I'd learned that much from watching him from the safety of my invisible corner behind the bar. He spoke in declaratives, commands disguised as conversation. I set the bottle down with a soft click, my pulse thrumming in my ears, and slowly raised my eyes. The first thing I noticed was the stillness. Morris Freeman didn't move like other people. He occupied space with an economy of motion that made every gesture deliberate, weighted with intent. He stood at the bar now, 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and woody with an edge of spice that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The second thing I noticed were his eyes, dark brown, almost black in the dim amber lighting of the lounge, and completely focused on me. Not through me, not past me. On me. They cataloged everything in a single sweep. My worn sneakers that squeaked against the polished floor, the twice-mended seam on my black work shirt, the exhaustion I'd tried to hide with concealer that hadn't quite covered the shadows beneath my eyes. For the first time in 2 years, someone was actually seeing me. What's your name? My throat tightened. In 8 months, not one patron had asked my name. I'd served hundreds of drinks, cleared countless tables, refilled glasses for Chicago's most powerful people. And I'd been invisible, a shadow. A ghost in black clothing who existed only to serve and disappear. Ebony. My own name sounded strange in my mouth, like a word from a language I'd forgotten how to speak. His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, something more dangerous than that. Ebony. He repeated it slowly, as if testing the weight of each syllable. You talk to yourself often? Heat crawled up my neck. I wanted to look away, to retreat back into the safety of invisibility. But those eyes held me pinned like a butterfly under glass. Sometimes, the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. When it's a long night, and tonight is a long night. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Marcus appeared at my elbow, his face carefully blank in that way that meant he was terrified. Mr. Freeman, sir, your usual booth is ready. Can I get you started with anything? Morris didn't look at him. His attention remained fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Bourbon. Neat. 2 fingers. He paused, the corner of his mouth lifting again. Ebony will bring it. Then he was moving away, crossing the lounge with those 2 men flanking him like shadows. Everyone in the room tracked his movement while pretending they weren't. The couple at table 7 suddenly became very interested in their menus. The businessman returned to his contracts with exaggerated focus. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Jesus Christ. Marcus's whisper was harsh in my ear. What the hell was that? I shook my head, unable to articulate what had just happened. My hands trembled as I reached for a fresh tumbler, for the bottle of McAllen I'd almost dropped moments before. He's never... Marcus trailed off, glancing toward the private booth in the back where Morris Freeman had settled into the shadows. He's never spoken to any of the staff. Not in the 3 years I've been here. He orders through his people, leaves through the back, tips through his accountant. Ebony, why did he ask your name? I don't know. The bourbon splashed into the glass. 2 fingers. Exactly measured despite my shaking hands. Professional habit overriding panic, but I did know. Somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the fear and confusion, I knew. He'd heard me talking to myself. He'd heard me being real for just a split second in a place where everyone wore masks. He'd seen the crack in my carefully constructed invisibility, and for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, that had interested him. I lifted the tray, the crystal tumbler centered perfectly on the polished silver surface, and started across the lounge. My sneakers didn't squeak this time. I'd learned to walk softly, to move without drawing attention. But now, with every step toward that booth in the back, I felt eyes tracking me. Not just Morris Freeman's. Everyone's. I wasn't invisible anymore. Before we see what happens when Ebony walks across that restaurant floor, if you're already hooked by this story, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this is going. Morris Freeman has plans for Ebony that she can't even imagine yet. The private booth sat in the darkest corner of the obsidian, separated from the main floor by a velvet curtain that was currently pulled back. Morris sat in the center, his back to the wall, his two men positioned on either side like bookends. The one on the left was massive, with a neck like a tree trunk and hands that could palm a basketball. The one on the right was leaner, wiry, with eyes that never stopped moving. I approached slowly, the tray balanced perfectly despite my hammering heart. "Your bourbon, Mr. Freeman." My voice came out steadier than I'd expected. Professional, detached. "Put it down." He gestured to the table, not breaking eye contact. I leaned forward to set the glass on the dark wood, hyper-aware of how close I was to him now. Close enough to see the precise line of his cornrows, the geometric tattoo that crawled up from beneath his collar and disappeared into his hairline. Close enough to notice the thin scar that cut through his left eyebrow, a pale line against dark skin. Close enough to feel dangerous. "Thank you, Ebony." The use of my name, spoken in that low, deliberate voice, sent something electric down my spine. I straightened quickly, clutching the empty tray against my chest like a shield. "Is there anything else you need, sir?" "Not tonight." His eyes held mine for one more long moment, and I saw something flicker in their depths. Curiosity, calculation, intent. "But I'm sure we'll talk again soon." It sounded like a promise. I nodded once and retreated, my legs surprisingly steady as I crossed back to the bar. I didn't look back, but I felt his gaze following me the entire way. Marcus grabbed my arm the second I was behind the bar. "What did he say?" "Nothing. Just..." I shook my head, setting the tray down with trembling hands. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. We both knew it. For the rest of the night, I worked on autopilot, pouring drinks, mixing cocktails, clearing tables. The familiar routine that usually calmed me felt wrong now, like a play I'd performed 1,000 times but suddenly forgotten my lines to. Every time I glanced toward that back booth, I found Morris Freeman watching me. Not constantly, not obviously, but enough that I knew I was being observed, studied, catalogued. By the time his party left at midnight, slipping out through the back entrance the way he always did, my nerves were frayed to nothing. I finished my shift in a daze, cleaned my station with mechanical precision, and changed out of my work clothes in the employee bathroom. It wasn't until I was walking to my car in the parking garage, my tips from the night clutched in my pocket, that I found the envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. Manila. Unmarked, expensive paper stock. My hands shook as I pulled it free and opened it under the dim fluorescent lights. $15,000 in crisp $100 bills, and underneath them, a small card with 2 lines written in sharp, precise handwriting. "For your discretion and the conversations you have with yourself. We'll talk soon." The signature was just 2 letters. MF. I stood there in the empty parking garage, holding more money than I'd seen in 2 years, and felt my carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. Morris Freeman had seen me, and now he wanted something. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the darkness of my studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling while Micah's breathing wheezed softly from the pull-out couch across the room. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it, practically glowing in my peripheral vision every time I closed my eyes. $15,000. I'd counted it 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. All hundreds, all real. I'd held one up to the light, checking for the security strip like I had any idea what I was looking for. But it looked legitimate, felt legitimate. "For your discretion." The words circled through my mind on an endless loop. Discretion about what? About hearing him ask who I was talking to? About serving him bourbon? About existing in his line of sight for 5 minutes? None of it made sense. But the money was real, and Micah's prescription refill was due in 3 days, and I had exactly $247 in my checking account. I turned over, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin, and tried not to think about how many months of treatment $15,000 could buy. Tried not to calculate how many nights I wouldn't have to stand behind that bar whispering mantras to myself just to get through my shift. Tried not to wonder what Morris Freeman wanted in return. When my alarm went off at 6, I'd maybe slept an hour. Micah was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch with his nebulizer mask strapped to his face. His shoulders hunched forward as he concentrated on breathing. The machine hissed rhythmically, pumping medication into his damaged lungs. "Morning," I said, my voice rough with exhaustion. He pulled the mask aside just long enough to smile at me. "You look terrible. Thanks. Love you too. Bad night at work?" I thought about Morris Freeman's dark eyes cataloging every detail of my face. About the weight of his attention settling on me like a physical thing. About an envelope full of cash and a promise that we'd talk soon. Something like that. I made breakfast while Micah finished his treatment. Scrambled eggs with the last of the cheese. Toast from the bread that was one day away from going stale. Orange juice watered down to make it stretch another few days. He ate without complaining, the way he always did. Even though I knew he was tired of eggs, tired of being careful about every bite, tired of measuring his life in medication schedules and doctor's appointments. "I might be able to pick up some extra shifts this week," I said, watching him push eggs around his plate. "Maybe get us something nice for dinner. What do you want?" His eyes lit up. "Pizza? Like real pizza? Not frozen?" My chest tightened. When had pizza become a luxury? Yeah, real pizza. After I got him on the school bus, I sat at the kitchen counter and stared at the envelope. In the morning light, it looked even more surreal. The cardstock was expensive, the handwriting precise and controlled. Everything about it screamed money and power and danger. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "You coming in tonight? Castellana wants to talk to you." My stomach dropped. I typed back quickly. "About what?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Didn't say. Just told me to make sure you're here." I looked at the envelope again. At the money that could change everything. At the 2 letters signed at the bottom of that card. MF. Morris Freeman had seen me. Really seen me. And now everyone else was noticing too. I pulled out my phone and started searching. Morris Freeman, Chicago. The results loaded instantly. Dozens of articles. Society pages showing him at charity galas in $1,000 suits. Business journals mentioning Freeman Enterprises and its diverse holdings in real estate, construction, entertainment. Reddit threads speculating about his connections, his influence, his reputation, and underneath it all, whispered between the lines, the truth everyone knew but nobody said out loud. Morris Freeman wasn't just a businessman. He was the businessman. The kind who made problems disappear. The kind whose name made grown men remember they had somewhere else to be. The kind who left $15,000 for a bartender he'd spoken to for 5 minutes. I closed my phone and pressed my palms against my eyes. What have I gotten myself into? For 2 days, I didn't touch the money. It sat in the envelope, hidden in the back of my closet behind winter clothes I couldn't afford to replace, calling to me like a siren song every time I passed by. I went to work. I served drinks. I whispered my mantras. I pretended everything was normal, while my mind calculated and recalculated what $15,000 could do. 3 months of Micah's medications, 4 if I stretched it, maybe 5 if I cut back on everything else. Or I could pay Tremaine. Get him off my back. Stop jumping every time my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Stop having nightmares about what he'd threatened to do if I missed another payment. On the 3rd day, my phone rang while I was restocking the bar before opening. Unknown number. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I answered. "Did you find my gift?" The voice was unmistakable. Smooth, controlled, with an undertone of something that might have been amusement. Morris Freeman sounded like a man who'd never been told no in his life. My grip tightened on the phone. "Mr. Freeman, just Morris. We're past formalities, don't you think?" A pause. "You haven't spent it yet." It wasn't a question. My blood ran cold. "How would you know that?" "The same way I know your brother Micah Curtis is 16 years old. Cystic fibrosis, genetic mutation Delta F 508. Currently on the wait list for the Pierce protocol at Northwestern Memorial. Though your insurance denial came through last week, they cited it as experimental treatment." His voice remained conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "You owe $8,300 to a loan shark named Tremaine, borrowed 6 months ago at 40% interest. It's ballooned to $14,000 now. He's been calling you twice a week. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the bar to steady myself. How do you dropped out of nursing school at UIC in your 3rd year when your parents died in that house fire. You were 3 semesters from graduating with honors. Your GPA was 3.8. You'd planned to specialize in pediatric care. He let that sit for a moment. Shall I continue? I couldn't breathe. He'd laid out my entire life in 30 seconds. Every desperate decision, every sacrifice, every private shame, I'd buried under the weight of just surviving. How do you know all this? I make it my business to know about people who interest me. His tone softened slightly, though the steel underneath remained. Keep the money, Ebony. Consider it a consultation fee. Consultation for what? My voice came out sharper than intended. What do you want from me? Your time, your presence, your discretion. I could hear him moving, the rustle of expensive fabric, the soft click of a door closing. I have business functions that require a particular kind of companion. Someone intelligent, someone observant, someone who understands the value of silence. You want me to be what? Exactly? You're my associate, he interrupted smoothly. Nothing more, nothing less. You'll accompany me to dinners, meetings, events where my presence is required. You'll be visible, polite, and discreet about anything you might see or hear. My mind raced. And in exchange, Micah gets into the Pierce protocol. Full funding. Tremaine gets paid with a message attached that you're under my protection. You go back to nursing school if that's what you want. You and your brother get to breathe without counting every dollar. It was too much, too fast, too impossible. I need time to think. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I'll be in touch with specifics, Ebony. Don't overthink this. You know what you need to do. The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence and the sound of my own racing heartbeat. He'd invaded every corner of my life without permission, cataloged my desperation like a balance sheet, and offered me everything I needed wrapped in a devil's bargain. And the worst part? I was already considering it. Pause for just a second. How many of you have felt this trapped? Like someone powerful saw straight through all your walls and offered you everything you needed, but at a price you couldn't calculate? Drop a comment below and subscribe. Let's talk about the impossible choices we make for the people we love. 3 days crawled by like months. I paid Micah's most urgent bills, the ones stamped with red warnings and final notice threats. Each transaction felt like a small betrayal, using money I hadn't earned, money that came with strings I couldn't yet see. Relief and dread twisted together in my stomach until I couldn't tell them apart. On the 4th night, Morris Freeman walked into the Obsidian Lounge and sat at the bar, not in his private booth, not in the shadows with his men flanking him like guards. At the bar, directly in my space, 3 feet from where I stood frozen with a bottle of vodka in my hand. The conversations around us didn't stop this time. They stuttered. People glanced over, then quickly away, suddenly very interested in their drinks. Good evening, Ebony. He settled onto the leather stool like he owned it, like he owned everything. Mr. Freeman. My voice came out steadier than my hands felt. Morris, he corrected. His eyes held mine, dark and patient. What would you drink if you could afford it? The question caught me off guard. What? If money wasn't an object, if you weren't working, what would you order? I hesitated, aware of Marcus watching us from the other end of the bar, aware of the couple at table 7 pretending not to eavesdrop. Bourbon. Neat. His lips curved. Good taste. Pour 2. My hands moved automatically, reaching for the Blantons, the good stuff we kept on the top shelf. I poured carefully, 2 fingers each, and slid 1 glass toward him. The other I kept, uncertain. Drink with me. It wasn't a request. I lifted the glass, the bourbon burning smooth and expensive down my throat. He watched me over the rim of his own glass, and I felt dissected under that gaze. I need someone visible at my side for certain business functions, he said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. Someone intelligent, observant, trustworthy, someone who knows the value of discretion. He paused. Someone who has everything to lose. There it was, the real proposition laid out in the open. You want me to be what? Eye candy? A trophy? The words came out sharper than intended, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. His expression hardened slightly, the first crack in that controlled facade. I want you to be exactly what you are, real. He leaned forward, closing the distance between us. Everyone in my world wears masks, Ebony. They perform, they pretend. You've spent 2 years being invisible, erasing yourself to survive. I want you visible, at my side, showing others that I value substance over performance. Why me? Because you're not for sale. You're for rent, and only out of desperation. That distinction matters. The brutal honesty of it stole my breath. And in return, I already knew. He'd told me on the phone. But I needed to hear it again. Needed to confirm this was real. Micah gets into the Pierce protocol. All expenses covered. Clinical trials, treatments, hospital stays, everything. Tremaine forgets your name. You go back to nursing school if you want. You and your brother get to breathe without calculating every meal, every prescription, every tomorrow. The trap closed around me with velvet efficiency. Everything I needed, everything Micah needed, wrapped in a bargain with a man who knew too much and offered too perfectly. I need time to think about it. Morris stood, adjusting his cuff with deliberate precision. A flash of that geometric tattoo showed at his wrist before disappearing under expensive fabric. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires, and you're back to being invisible. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the bar between us. Matte black with a single phone number embossed in silver. Call me when you decide. He left through the front entrance this time, not the back. Making a statement, making sure everyone saw him leave the bar where he'd sat and talked to me like I mattered. I picked up the card, my fingerprints smudging the pristine surface, and felt the last of my resistance crumbling under the weight of Micah's next doctor's appointment. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Morris Freeman sitting at my bar, offering me everything I needed with the calm certainty of a man who already knew my answer. Micah was having a bad day. I could hear it in his breathing before I even opened my eyes. That wet, labored sound that meant his lungs were filling with mucus faster than his body could clear it. I found him in the bathroom, hunched over the sink, coughing until his face turned red. "It's fine," he gasped when he saw me. "Just need my vest." I helped him into the percussion therapy vest, strapping him in and turning on the machine that would shake his chest, loosening the mucus so he could breathe. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall, exhausted from the effort of just existing. "We're going to figure this out," I said quietly. He opened one eye. "You keep saying that, because it's true. Ebony." His voice was soft, knowing. "You don't have to protect me from the truth. I know we're broke. I know the insurance said no. I know you're working yourself to death trying to keep me alive." My throat tightened. "Micah, whatever you have to do," he interrupted. "It's okay. I trust you." I left for work before he could see me cry. The call came during my lunch break. Unknown number, but this time it was a woman's voice, professional and crisp. "Miss Curtis? This is Dr. Raymond Pierce's office at Northwestern Memorial. I'm calling to inform you that Micah Curtis has been moved to the top of our waitlist for Pierce protocol evaluation. We have an appointment scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "I'm sorry, what?" "Monday at 9 a.m. We'll need Micah's complete medical history and insurance information, though I'm told funding has already been arranged through a private benefactor." I hadn't called Morris. I hadn't made a decision. But apparently, he'd made it for me. "Thank you," I managed. "We'll be there." That evening, I was heating up ramen in our tiny kitchen when I saw the black Mercedes SUV pull up outside. Sleek, expensive, impossible to miss in our neighborhood of rusted sedans and dented pickups. A woman emerged. Tall, elegant, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she was worth. I met her at the door before she could knock. "Ebony Curtis?" Her smile was professional, warm but not familiar. "I'm Simone. Mr. Freeman asked me to deliver this." She handed me a garment bag, the kind with a designer logo stitched discreetly on the side. "He requests your presence tomorrow evening. The address is on the card inside. A car will collect you at 7. I started, but she was already walking back to the SUV. 7 p.m., Miss Curtis. I look forward to working with you." The Mercedes disappeared down the street, leaving me standing in my doorway holding a garment bag that weighed almost nothing and felt like everything. Inside was a dress. Deep blue silk that caught the light like water, elegant without being flashy, sophisticated without being cold. I checked the tag, my exact size. Of course it was. The card read simply, "Ristorante Bella Vista. 8 p.m. Wear this." I stood in my cramped apartment, Micah's nebulizer hissing in the background, holding a dress that cost more than I made in a month, and felt the last of my choices slip away. I pulled out my phone and texted the number on Morris's card. Monday, I'll be there. The response came immediately, as if he'd been waiting. I never doubted it. Simone arrived at exactly 7 p.m. The Mercedes idled at the curb while I kissed Micah goodbye, smoothing down the blue silk dress that fit like it had been made for me. Because it probably had been. You look fancy, Micah said, grinning despite the oxygen cannula in his nose. Hot date? Business dinner. The lie tasted bitter. With a guy who sends cars like that? He nodded toward the Mercedes. Must be some business. I didn't have an answer for that. The drive took us through downtown, past the restaurants with their glowing signs and waiting lines, into a neighborhood where the buildings got older and more expensive. Simone pulled up to a facade with no sign, just a discreet brass number and a valet who materialized the moment we stopped. Ristorante Bella Vista, Simone said. Mr. Freeman is waiting inside. The interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place where conversations happened in whispers and deals were made over wine that cost more than my car. A hostess led me through the dining room, past tables of men in suits that screamed power, women dripping in jewelry that could fund a small country. Morris stood when I approached. The gesture caught me off guard. He wore charcoal gray tonight, 3 pieces, fitted perfectly to his frame. The platinum chain at his throat caught the candlelight. Ebony, he pulled out my chair. You look stunning. You didn't give me much choice. His lips curved. I gave you exactly the right choice. Throughout dinner, men approached our table. Not obviously, not with deference that would draw attention, but with the careful respect of people navigating dangerous waters. Morris introduced me to each one the same way. This is Miss Curtis, whose judgment I value highly. Not his date, not his companion, his advisor. I watched it register on their faces, the recalculation, the understanding that I wasn't decoration, I was significance. By elevating my position, Morris made me untouchable. Anyone who disrespected me, disrespected him. It was brilliant and terrifying. The conversation swirled around me. Territory, consolidation, profit margins that probably had nothing to do with legal business. I kept my expression neutral, sipping wine I barely tasted, watching body language the way I'd learned to read drunk patrons at the bar. Morris leaned close during a lull, his breath warm against my ear. The man in the corner booth, gray suit, silver watch. Trust him or no? I glanced over casually. The man was smiling, but his hands were clenched under the table, knuckles white. His eyes kept darting to the exit. No, I whispered back. He's terrified. Whatever he's saying, he doesn't believe it. Morris's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Satisfaction, maybe? Or confirmation. By the time dinner ended, I'd given him 3 more reads. All apparently accurate, based on the subtle nods he gave after each assessment. He walked me to the car himself, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back, possessive without being aggressive. A public claim. You're a natural, he said as Simone opened the door. Same time next week? The question I'd been dreading finally forced its way out. What if I see something I shouldn't? Something illegal? Morris studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable in the streetlight. You'll practice the discretion I'm paying for. He paused, and something almost human crossed his face. But Ebony, I don't deal in human trafficking. I don't touch children. And I don't poison my community with hard drugs. Whatever you see, it's not that. It was a line. A boundary drawn in sand. Maybe meaningless, maybe not. But somehow, it mattered. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, he stepped back. Simone will be in touch. I slid into the Mercedes, and through the tinted window, I watched Morris Freeman disappear back into the restaurant where dangerous men made dangerous deals, and I'd just become part of it. 6 weeks blurred together. Gallery openings where art I didn't understand sold for prices that made me dizzy. Private dinners in restaurants with no menus, just chefs who cooked whatever Morris requested. Business meetings in hotel suites where I sat silent and observant, reading the room the way he'd taught me to read patrons at the bar. Always, I was introduced the same way. Miss Curtis, whose judgment I value highly. Always. I was treated with careful respect that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with the man at my side. Micah started the Pierce protocol on a gray Tuesday morning. I held his hand while they inserted the IV, watched the experimental medication drip into his veins, and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. The improvement was gradual, subtle at first. But by week 3, he was breathing easier. By week 5, He'd gone 2 full days without needing the percussion vest. "Whatever you're doing," he said one night, "keep doing it." If only he knew. I started noticing them around week 4. The watchers. A black sedan parked across from our building that changed shifts every 8 hours. The man in the coffee shop who was always there when I arrived for Micah's morning medications. The woman jogging past our apartment at exactly 6 a.m. every day. Same route, same time. Morris's security had extended to me. On week 7, he picked me up himself. No Simone. No driver. Just Morris in a midnight blue Aston Martin that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach clench. He drove us to the lakefront, parking at a overlook where the city lights reflected off the black water like fallen stars. For a long moment, he just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring out at nothing. "Tremaine doesn't like that I bought your debt," he said finally. "He's made inquiries about you. About Micah. Where you live. Where he goes to school. What route you take to Northwestern for his treatments." Ice flooded my veins. "What?" "He's been told to back off. Multiple times. But he's stupid and proud. And he doesn't like being embarrassed." Morris turned to face me, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. "He thinks you're leverage." What does that mean? But I already knew. I'd seen enough in the past 6 weeks to understand how Morris's world worked. "It means I'm increasing your security. It means you don't go anywhere alone. Simone will coordinate with you on schedules, routes, everything." He paused, and something almost vulnerable crossed his face. "It means you're under my protection officially. People need to know that touching you means war." The weight of that settled over me like a blanket. Protection meant ownership. Safety meant possession. I'd traded invisibility for visibility, and now I was learning the price. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out quieter than intended. "Really?" Morris was silent for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been old pain. "I had a sister. Younger. Sickle cell disease." He stared out at the lake, but I knew he was seeing something else. Someone else. "We couldn't afford the treatments she needed. I watched her die slowly while I was out there hustling corner drugs, not making enough to save her. I was 16 years old, and I held her hand while she suffocated on her own blood. My breath caught. I swore that day," he continued, "that no one under my protection would ever die because they couldn't afford to live. Not family, not friends, not anyone I claimed as mine." He looked at me then, and the rawness in his eyes stole whatever words I might have had. "You and Micah are mine now, Ebony. That means something to me." I saw him fully for the first time. Not the dangerous man who'd walked into the obsidian and shattered my invisibility. Not the criminal who negotiated territory over expensive wine, but the boy who'd watched his sister die and carved himself into something powerful enough to prevent it from ever happening again. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." He reached over and took my hand, his palm warm against mine. "I won't let anything happen to you, and God help me." I believed him. 3 months into our arrangement, I was closing up the obsidian on a quiet Tuesday. Morris was in Detroit on business, or so Simone had told me when she dropped off this week's schedule. The lounge was empty except for Marcus, who was counting the register in the back office. I was wiping down the bar when the front door opened. 3 men entered. I recognized Tremaine immediately, shorter than I remembered, with a gold chain that caught the dim light, and eyes that were too bright, too wild, high on something. The 2 men flanking him looked like they'd been pulled from central casting for generic thugs. "We're closed," I said, my voice steadier than my suddenly racing heart. Tremaine laughed, the sound sharp and wrong. "Closed. That's funny." He crossed the room with false confidence, his movements jerky. "You think you're special now? Think Morris Freeman puts you above business?" I reached for my phone. He was faster. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise, yanking me forward across the bar. Bottles rattled. A glass fell, shattering on the floor. "You're coming with me." His breath smelled like cheap whiskey and something chemical. "We're gonna renegotiate your debt, and maybe I'll send your brother a message about family loyalty." Terror spiked through me. "Let go of me. Make me, princess." He pulled harder, dragging me around the bar. I fought, clawing at his hand, but he was stronger and completely irrational with whatever he was on. "Marcus!" I screamed. The front door opened. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Everything stopped. Tremaine's grip loosened slightly as he turned toward the entrance. Morris Freeman stood in the doorway, and I'd never seen anything more terrifying in my life. He wore a black suit, no tie, his expression carved from ice, but his eyes burned with something cold and lethal. "Take your hands off her." Each word was pronounced with surgical precision. A scalpel cutting through flesh. Tremaine, too far gone on drugs and pride, actually laughed. "She's collateral, Freeman. She was mine before you decided to play hero." Morris moved. I'd never seen anyone move that fast. One moment he was at the door, the next he had Tremaine on the floor, knee pressed to his chest, that tattooed hand wrapped around his throat. The two thugs reached for their waistbands, but froze when Morris's men materialized from the shadows, guns drawn and aimed with professional calm. "She was never yours." Morris's voice was soft now, conversational, which somehow made it worse. "She's mine, under my protection, under my care, mine to value." His hand tightened. Tremaine's face started turning purple. "And you touched what belongs to me. Threatened a child under my protection. In my establishment." Morris. I barely recognized my own voice. He didn't look at me. His entire focus remained on Tremaine, who was making choking sounds now, hands scrabbling uselessly at Morris's wrist. "Boss." One of Morris's men stepped forward. Morris stood in one fluid motion, adjusting his suit jacket like he'd just finished a business meeting instead of nearly strangling a man to death. "Take him. Make sure he understands this is his only warning." His voice went even quieter. "If he's stupid enough to ignore it, make sure there's nothing left to warn." They dragged Tremaine out, his feet scraping against the floor, whimpering sounds coming from his damaged throat. The two thugs were escorted out at gunpoint, hands raised. All their bravado evaporated. Then it was just Morris and me, in the silent lounge. My heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. He turned to face me, and the cold fury melted into something else. Concern. Fear, maybe. For me. "Did he hurt you?" I looked down at my wrist. Red marks were already blooming into bruises, perfect impressions of Tremaine's fingers. My hands were shaking. Actually, my whole body was shaking. "Ebony." Morris crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands hovering near my shoulders like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch me. "Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," I whispered. But I wasn't fine. The adrenaline was crashing now, taking my knees with it. Morris caught me before I fell, pulling me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head. "I've got you," he murmured into my hair. "I've got you." And for the first time in 2 years, I believed someone actually did. We're in the final stretch now, and Ebony is about to make the choice that changes everything. But before we get to that moment, if this story grabbed you, if you're invested in how this ends, I want you in this community. Subscribe, comment below about the moment you stopped fighting alone, and let's build something together. Now let's finish Ebony's story. Morris guided me to one of the leather booths, his hand steady at my elbow. I sat, and he crouched in front of me, carefully taking my bruised wrist in his hands. His touch was impossibly gentle, at odds with the violence I'd just witnessed. "You're not fine," he said quietly, his thumb tracing the edge of the bruises without pressing. "And you shouldn't have to be. I can take care of myself." The words came automatically. A defense I'd built over 2 years of survival. "I've been doing it for years. I know you can." His eyes met mine, dark and intense and completely focused. "But why should you have to? Why should you be invisible, exhausted, alone, when you could be seen, protected, valued?" The question cracked something open inside me. All the walls I'd built, all the mantras I'd whispered, all the careful invisibility I'd cultivated to just survive another day. "This is insane." My voice broke. "You're a criminal. You hurt people. This whole thing it's what you need." He said it with absolute certainty. "Admit it, Ebony. You're tired of being invisible. You're tired of fighting alone. You're tired of whispering mantras to get through the night instead of actually living." The tears came before I could stop them. Hot, angry, exhausted tears that I'd been holding back for so long I'd forgotten they were there. "Yes." The word ripped out of me. "God help me, yes. I'm so tired." Morris moved from his crouch to sit beside me, pulling me against his chest without hesitation. One hand cradled my head, the other wrapped around my back, holding me together while I fell apart. "Then stop," he murmured into my hair. "Let me carry it. Let me be what you need." I should have pushed him away. Should have remembered that he was dangerous, that he'd just nearly killed a man in front of me, that accepting his protection meant accepting everything that came with it. But I was so tired of being strong, so tired of calculating every dollar, Every meal, every breath, so tired of being invisible while the weight of keeping Micah alive crushed me slowly. So I didn't push away. I surrendered. We stayed like that until my shaking stopped, until the tears dried on my cheeks and my breathing evened out, until the exhaustion of 2 years of fighting alone caught up with me and dragged me under. And I let it. Because for the first time in so long, I wasn't alone. "I've got you," Morris said again, his voice steady and sure. "I've got you, and I'm not letting go." My hands fisted in his suit jacket, expensive fabric crumpling under my grip. "What does this mean?" "It means you stop working at the Obsidian. It means you and Micah move somewhere safer, somewhere I can actually protect you. It means you go back to nursing school like you were always meant to." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hand coming up to cup my face. "It means you let me take care of you the way you've been taking care of everyone else." "I don't know how to do that." "Then I'll teach you." His thumb brushed away a tear I didn't know had fallen. "Starting now. You're done for tonight. I'm taking you home, and tomorrow Simone will help you start looking at apartments." "Morris, no arguments, Ebony. Not tonight. Tonight you just let me take care of you." I nodded, too exhausted to fight, too worn down to resist. He helped me to my feet, kept his arm around me as we walked to his car. The Aston Martin felt like a spaceship compared to my beat-up sedan, all leather and expensive technology. He drove me home in silence, his hand finding mine across the center console, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. When we pulled up to my building, he walked me to the door, waited while I unlocked it, then caught my hand before I could go inside. "Get some sleep. Simone will call you tomorrow." "Thank you," I whispered. "For coming back early. For always." He lifted my bruised wrist and pressed a kiss to the marks there, gentle and reverent. "I'll always come back for you." I watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to my apartment where Micah was sleeping peacefully, his breathing steady and clear. I'd surrendered tonight, stopped fighting, let someone else carry the weight, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later, I stood on the terrace of Morris's River North penthouse, watching the city lights stretch toward the horizon like a constellation fall into earth. Behind me, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could hear Micah laughing at something on TV, the sound clear and strong and alive. The Pierce protocol had worked. Micah was in remission. His lungs were clear, his energy boundless. Last week, he'd asked if he could try out for the school basketball team. I was in my final semester of nursing school, 3 weeks from taking my boards. My textbooks were spread across the dining table Morris never used. Notes color-coded and organized the way I'd always studied before life had derailed everything. Morris had changed too. Slowly, carefully, he'd begun legitimizing portions of his empire. Real estate investments, legal construction contracts, a foundation for families drowning in medical debt, helping people the way he'd helped us. He still operated in shadows, still made men nervous when he walked into rooms. But he was building something different, something that might someday be clean. The terrace door opened. I felt him before I saw him, that shift in the air that always announced his presence. "You're thinking too loud," Morris said, coming to stand beside me. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves. The geometric tattoo on his forearm caught the light from inside. "Just thinking about how different everything is. Do you ever regret it?" His voice was careful, measured. "Choosing this? Choosing me?" I considered the question honestly. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible, exhausted, whispering mantras just to survive another shift. Now I stood in a penthouse overlooking a city that no longer felt like it was crushing me. Micah was healthy. I was 3 weeks from being a nurse, and the man beside me had made all of it possible. "I regret that it took so long," I said finally, "that I spent so much time thinking I had to be invisible to survive." Morris reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man," he said, opening it to reveal a ring that took my breath away. Elegant, understated, a single diamond that caught the city lights and threw them back, transformed. "I'm not going to promise you safe or normal, but I will promise you this." He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes holding mine. "You will never be invisible again. You will never fight alone. You will be seen, valued, protected, and loved for exactly who you are." He took my hand, the one with the long faded bruises from that night at the Obsidian. "Let me be your family, Ebony. Let me be Micah's family. Say yes." I looked at this man who'd noticed me when everyone else looked away. Dangerous, devoted, damaged, determined. A criminal building something legitimate. A killer who'd saved my brother's life. A man who'd seen me talking to myself behind a bar and decided I was worth everything. Yes, the ring slid onto my finger like it had always belonged there. Morris pulled me close, kissing me with a tenderness that still surprised me every time. This gentle side he showed only to us. Should we tell Micah? I asked against his lips. Together. We found him in the living room, geometry homework spread across the coffee table. He looked up when we entered. Then his eyes dropped to my hand and a grin split his face. Finally, he said. Does this mean Morris is officially my big brother? Because I've been telling people that for months. Morris laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Yeah, kid. Official. Micah launched himself at Morris, who caught him easily, both of them laughing while I stood there with tears in my eyes and a ring on my finger. 3 weeks later, I walked across the stage at my nursing school graduation. The auditorium was packed, but I only saw 2 faces. Micah in the front row, healthy and whole, cheering loud enough to embarrass me, and Morris beside him, standing when they called my name. Pride written across his face like a promise kept. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, valued, loved. I'd chosen dangerous belonging over safe invisibility. Chosen a man who'd noticed me whispering mantras and decided I deserved more than survival. I'd chosen to be magnificently, dangerously visible, and I'd never been more alive.